In 2129, observatories in the southern hemisphere detected an unidentified object entering Earth's atmosphere. It did not respond to defense systems and emitted no heat or known radiation. It moved with mathematical precision until it came to a stop over the Atacama Desert. Cameras captured the descent. No fire, no noise, just a light that slowly faded upon touching the ground. Communications were interrupted for several minutes. Then, nothing. No signals, no response, no explanation. That night, something landed on Earth, and no one knew what it was. Subscribe for more journeys into the future. The object was detected shortly before dawn. It entered the atmosphere without emitting heat, leaving no trace of friction, and came to a stop over the Atacama Desert. Cameras captured its descent, but no one could determine what it was. There was no fire, no noise, no signs of radiation. Just a light that went out upon touching the ground. Authorities cordoned off the area and cut off communications. No official statement, no explanation. For days, the object remained there, motionless, surrounded by absolute silence. Rumors spread quickly. A fallen satellite, an experimental spacecraft, or something much older. No one dared to get too close, and while the whole world speculated about what might be inside, the object remained there, waiting. Days went by, and the official silence only made matters worse. No one explained what that object was, who had found it first, or why access to the area had been completely blocked off. In the absence of answers, theories began to spring up, and they did so in a chaotic manner. Some spoke of an alien spacecraft. Others claimed it was a warning, a message from another civilization. On forums, people said the government was hiding something huge. That there were bodies inside. That it was non-human technology. That the object hadn't fallen, but had chosen to land right there. Within hours, social media was flooded with videos, fake analyses, and doctored recordings. Every image seemed like proof. Every silence, a confirmation. Fear began to grow. There were those who claimed that something was going to happen, that this wasn't a simple event, but the beginning of something much bigger. And for the first time, headlines around the world agreed on one phrase. Something has arrived, and no one knows what it wants. Eight days later, the object moved again. A hatch slowly opened. No one knew what to expect. A figure emerged from the light inside. At first glance, human. But something didn't add up. Pale, almost blue skin, long limbs, Unblinking, fixed eyes. It did nothing. It just stared at the horizon. For minutes, no one spoke. The sensors detected no threat, and yet everyone took a step back. It was human, but it wasn't from here. The images were already public. The world knew something had happened, but no one knew where they were or who was in control of the situation. After the initial wave of images and theories, the government stepped in. The dissemination of any material related to the event was banned, broadcasts were blocked, and the original files disappeared from all platforms. For a few days, social media was flooded with copies and rumors. But soon public attention shifted. The theories remained alive, though only among a few whom no one took seriously. Officially, nothing had happened in the desert. For days, there were no answers, only rumors, silence, and fear. Governments kept the area sealed off, fearing an uncontrollable reaction. Meanwhile, scientific teams observed from a distance. Drones recorded every movement. The beings would step out the ship's door, stand still for a few minutes, and go back inside. They never wandered far. Preliminary analyses revealed something unexpected. Their bodies were adapted to different environmental conditions, but their DNA was entirely human. No one understood what that meant or where they came from. The confusion was total. Finally, the order was given. They had to be moved to a place off the map, safe, hidden where they could be studied without the rest of the world knowing. The transfer took place in the early hours of the morning. No announcements, no records, no witnesses. Just a small convoy crossing the desert under air escort. The beings were taken to an underground facility in an area with no publicly known coordinates. A place designed to keep them alive and silent. There, the direct observation phase began. The scientists confirmed what they had already feared. Their physiology was human, but their adaptations were not. They could withstand extreme variations in temperature, radiation, and atmospheric pressure. It was as if their bodies remembered other worlds. They showed no aggression. They did not speak. They remained calm, observing, as if waiting for something. The medical reports were immediately classified. Only a few knew what had actually been found in the desert. And from that moment on, everything surrounding the case disappeared from the public domain. The following months turned everything on its head. Until then, the question had been what those beings were. Afterward, it became something else. Where they came from, and why they had returned. The work of the linguistic and biological teams began to come together. The symbols inside the ship were not mere decoration. They formed a structure, a language, a fragmented chronicle of something far older than any known civilization. What they managed to translate was unsettling. Long before any recorded history, humanity had already achieved extraordinary development. A global civilization capable of harnessing the planet's energy and building on a scale impossible for the modern world. But it did not survive either. The record spoke of a progressive collapse. Tectonic shifts, solar disturbances, failures in the planet's equilibrium. They did not describe an isolated catastrophe, but a pattern, a cycle. When they realized they could not stop it, they set their final project in motion. 12 ships were launched in different directions into deep space. They were not 12 identical copies. Each carried a different part of humanity. Genetic banks, cultural archives, technology, forms of organization, different ways of surviving. 12 possibilities. 12 attempts to ensure that something human would endure when Earth could no longer do so. Only one was recorded with certainty, the one that reached a planet in the Orion system. There, for millennia, their descendants continued to exist. They changed, they adapted, they evolved, but they never ceased to be human. That was why the genetic analyses had been so puzzling. They weren't aliens. They were descendants of those who left when Earth was no longer safe. The most unsettling thing was what was missing. There were no confirmed destinations for the other 11 ships. There was no contact. There was no history, only silence. And the further the translations progressed, the less clear the real reason for their return became. The visitors didn't speak of help. They didn't speak of rescue. They repeated sequences, maps, orbital patterns, geological nodes scattered across the planet. As if they didn't need humanity to understand the whole truth. Just enough. The necessary part. It was then that an unbearable suspicion began to grow within the project. That the descendants of Orion had not returned to warn humanity. They had returned to ensure that humanity made the decision that they needed. The visitors didn't make any proposals. They didn't ask for access. They didn't negotiate. They didn't explain anything. They just repeated the sequence. Maps, coordinates, light patterns, always the same. At first, it seemed like an attempt at communication. Then it stopped looking like that. They weren't speaking, they were showing something, and the team did the only thing it could do. Try to understand it. Linguists reconstructed fragments, engineers isolated patterns, analysts cross-referenced data with real maps. Each group worked on a part. No one had the complete system, but everyone was moving in the same direction. For days, everything was slow, controlled, methodical, until it stopped being that way. The first anomaly was almost invisible, a response in the systems that shouldn't have occurred, a pattern that hadn't been programmed. But it was there. Then more followed. Small variations, unexpected readings, behaviors that didn't fit any model. No one spoke of activation. But everyone stopped using that word, analysis. Because at some point, without knowing exactly when, they had stopped observing the system, and the system had begun to respond. On the other side of the glass, the visitors remained motionless, watching, as if it weren't a mistake, as if it were exactly what was supposed to happen. At first, no one wanted to admit it. The technicians blamed interference. The analysts blamed reading errors. The commanders blamed a glitch in the processing chain. But the anomalies kept growing. Every time the team tried to decipher a new fragment, the system responded. Not with words, not with new images, with activity, patterns that reorganize themselves. Sequences that completed themselves without human intervention. Cross-readings between points on the planet that shouldn't have been connected. It no longer looked like a file. It looked like an infrastructure, and it was waking up. That was when the project began to fall apart. The team stopped working as a single unit. The military demanded that all testing be halted. The scientists asked for more time. The servers began blocking access without direct orders. No one knew if they were holding the system back or helping it to complete itself. Inside the center, the tension became unbearable. And on the other side of the glass, the visitors continued to watch. In silence, without fear, without surprise. As if they knew that, at that point, there was no way to stop it. The confirmation came too late. What they had assumed was an internal response was no longer taking place within the facility. It had spread outside. The first warnings came from low-orbit satellites. Brief pulses, irregular, impossible to classify. They were not known transmissions. They did not follow any human protocol, and yet they were using the terrestrial network, That was when everything accelerated. Orders were given to cut links, isolate nodes, disconnect entire systems. But there was nothing left to isolate. The sequence wasn't being executed from a single point. It was being completed everywhere. Every attempt to stop it generated a new response. Every block opened another route. Every intervention made it more stable. As if the system had been waiting for exactly that. For 4 minutes, several satellites stopped obeying. They reoriented their systems. They adjusted their coordinates. And they transmitted. A narrow pulse. Precise. Directed toward a single region of the sky, Orion. No one in the room moved. Because in that instant, they all understood the same thing. They weren't decoding a message. They had activated it. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't an order. It wasn't even a clear mistake. It was worse. It had happened because they tried to understand it. When they managed to reconstruct the core of the sequence, the silence became unbearable. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a contact. It was a location signal. A beacon, ancient, dormant, designed to light up when someone completed the process. On the other side of the glass, the visitors didn't react. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just watched, without surprise, without urgency, as if none of it were unexpected. As if they had been waiting far too long for exactly that moment. No one spoke for several minutes. There was no need to. The data kept coming in. The satellites had returned to normal. The transmissions had stopped. The systems were responding. But something had changed. Not on Earth. Out there. The initial calculations were inconclusive. Incomplete trajectories, weak readings, interference impossible to filter out. Until they were no longer so. A return signal appeared in the deep logs, then another, and another. They weren't continuous transmissions. They weren't messages. They were trajectory corrections, adjustments. As if something far away from there had changed course. That was when they reconstructed the full meaning of the sequence. They hadn't sent a message. They had made Earth visible. The network wasn't meant to protect the planet, nor to stabilize it, nor to save it. It served a single purpose, to be found. The 12 ships did not form a fleet. They were a protocol. If the source became detectable again, if the signal reappeared, all of them had to correct their course, without exception, without confirmation, without knowing what they would find upon arrival. For thousands of years, those ships had traveled alone, closed off from the outside world, separated, out of contact, becoming something different. Something that could no longer be measured against what humanity understood as human. Not even the visitors knew, because they too had failed to find them. Until now. The silence in the room was absolute, because for the first time, everyone understood the same thing. The signal hadn't called out to one civilization. It had called out to 11. 11 separate histories. 11 different ways of surviving. 11 versions of what humanity could have become. And none of them had been seen in thousands of years. On the other side of the glass, one of the visitors looked up. There was no relief on his face. There was no fear. Only something harder to interpret. Recognition. As if that moment were not an ending, but the exact point where everything began again. For millennia, those ships had traveled in silence, changing, adapting, forgetting. And now, they had all received the same signal. But no one could be sure that what returned would still be human. Earth was about to encounter 12 different versions of its own future.